Okay, so this is the data set that I downloaded from the WDI and that I also share with you. And you see it comes with two sheets. One is called series metadata. I don't really know what that is good for. And then it becomes a little bit clearer when you click on country metadata. And you can see we have here the country names, the 217 countries that we downloaded. And the income group, like low income, upper middle income. So that is a nominal categorical, a ordinal categorical variable. And we have here the region, which is a nominal categorical variable. And then I already created another sheet called for practice, where I just downloaded the columns that we probably need. We don't really need the code. But what's important is we know the country name and the income group and the region. So now we wanted to create a frequency table for the nominal categorical variable region. And you can see Afghanistan is Middle East and North Africa, and Albania is Europe and Central Asia, Algeria, Middle East and North Africa. And what we want to do is we basically want to count how often do we have, how many countries are in Middle East and North Africa, how many are in East Asia and the Pacific, and so on. So the way we do that is we use a pivot table, but before we work with a pivot table, I also activated my keystroke visualizer. So when I press, for example, now escape, you can see I'm pressing escape because I probably will move around the data set with some keystrokes, and you might be interested in what I'm doing. So anyhow, so now the first thing we want to do is we want to insert a pivot table. So if you go to insert, you see there's pivot table. Okay, so first we need to upload the data into the pivot table. And the first command that I want to show you is Control A. Control A. And you see that highlights the array of filled cells. And by the way, you can see in the income group, you can see here something highlighted in yellow. And that is because Ethiopia didn't have a classification by the World Bank. So I just decided that's probably low income. And the same I did for Venezuela, which I believe, when I look at the available data, it's probably lower middle income. So that is why, in case you wonder why that is yellow. But anyhow, so the first command that I showed you was Control A, and again Control A highlights all the filled cells. Typically what you also can do is you can click into the first cell, A1, and then you press Shift, and then with your right hand Control, and then the arrow, and then you see you can also highlight data this way. Okay, so now I highlighted the relevant data. So now we go to Insert, then Pivot Table, then we click the first option from Table Range, and then we can see, yeah, that is from cell A1 to D218, and then we open it in a new worksheet. So now we have here sheet 1, and I move a little bit here. So now I want to create a frequency table, and I want to have in the rows the income group, so I can just drag income group into the rows. And now you see what happens. We have here high income, low income, lower middle income group. but actually we didn't want the income group but the region, so I just can delete again the income group, and now I drag region into the rows, and now we have the region here. So now if I want to know how many observations do I have in each category, I just drag the region into the values, and now by default it says here count of region. So that means we have like 37 countries in East Asia and the Pacific, 58 in Europe and Central Asia. Okay, so the count is the frequency, and from this table we can now create a frequency table. And what I do is I'll just copy the output from the pivot table. Now I just highlight it quickly with the mouse, and now I press Ctrl C and I open a new sheet. And I just paste it somewhere here. And actually I press Ctrl C, I just go back again, and what I do is I paste special. So I click into a cell and now I right click, and then there is a paste option that says I want only the values. No formatting, no nothing. Okay, and now we can't really read East Asia and Pacific. So if you highlight the columns and you double click in between, it automatically fits to content. Okay, so now we have here the count or the frequency. Okay, so I fit again to content. And the next column I create is the cumulative frequency. Cumulative frequency. Okay, but before we do that, and that is like an important best practice, what we do is we sort the categories typically from highest to lowest frequency. So we highlight all the frequencies. I don't highlight the grand total because that would be then on top. I want to keep that in the bottom. So we go to data, sort by frequency, and then largest to smallest. Okay, so that is typically a very good practice. So you don't want to sort necessarily the region alphabetically, but you typically want to sort them from highest to lowest frequency. Okay, so now we can add the cumulative frequency. So the cumulative frequency, cumulatively Europe and Central Asia, is equal to the 58. So I just use basically a simple formula. So, but then cumulatively Europe and Central Asia plus Sub-Saharan Africa is equal to cumulatively Europe and Central Asia plus the 48. So cumulatively Europe and Central Asia plus Sub-Saharan Africa is 106. And then again, cumulatively Europe and Central Asia plus Sub-Saharan Africa plus Latin America and the Caribbean, that is the 106 plus the 42. And this is not always the same formula, so I can copy down that formula. So I click into the cell that says 148, I press Shift and arrow down. And now if you press Ctrl D, it copies everything down. And little surprisingly, cumulatively, if you have all regions summed up, of course we should get to 217, which is the grand total. Now we can also create the relative frequency. and I'll just abbreviate that. So the relative frequency for Europe and Central Asia is obviously equal to the 58 divided by the total of 217. And because I want to copy down that formula, I want to avoid that the cell, which is F11, that this is being shifted down. So I fix that, and you can fix that by clicking between the F and the 11, and now you press F4. And then you see those little dollar signs, and that will fix the cell F11. Okay, so the relative frequency of Europe and Central Asia is 0.26, or more than a quarter. And now I copy down again. So what I did is I have here a cell, and now I press Shift, arrow down, and now Control D. Control D is copy down. Now I can also have the cumulative frequency. I just cumulative relative frequency. So I also abbreviate that. And the cumulative relative frequency of Europe and Central Asia is again, of course, the 0.26. But cumulatively, Europe and Central Asia plus Sub-Saharan Africa is equal to the 0.26 plus the 0.22. So that means almost 50% of all the countries are in Europe and Central Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. But now I can copy down again that formula. So I used again Shift and arrow down, and now I press Control D. And also, a little surprisingly, the cumulative relative frequency of all the regions must be 1. Sometimes people prefer the percentage frequency. So the percentage frequency, that is of course the same as the relative frequency. So I copy this down again. So I basically copy the relative frequency table, but then I just tell Excel use the percent style. So I got there by right click, percent style. If you want to go back again, you just go to the comma. Okay, and if you want to add some decimals, we can do that too. And lastly, what we can do is we can add the cumulative percentage frequency or percent frequency. Okay, so cumulatively percentage, that is equal to 26.73%. And cumulatively Europe and Central Asia, that is 26% plus the 22%. So it's the same logic. And now we can copy down that formula again with Control D. And now we have a nice frequency table. If you want to, you still can format it a little bit nicer. Maybe the column headings might be in bold. You can fit to content. Maybe you want to have everything centered. It's also not typically good style to have too many decimals. So, 3 decimal points is typically enough for the relative frequency and 2 for the percentage frequency. Okay, so now we have a frequency table, and beginning with the next video, we will work with that frequency table in order to create some graphical descriptives. So